So what we'll do is there'll be a series of questions that I have prepared to ask. But in the meantime, as mentioned, the QR code is live. So if there's any questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to pop in there. But also there will be questions from the audience, so you can raise your hand at any time, and we can entertain those as we go along. So let's dive into it. I think we don't really need an introduction of Krishan. I think in terms of the company John Keells, and of course his role at the Chamber at the present point in time. But I think we'll maybe start on the economy, and that's something you track quite closely, and also which is important for your businesses as well. As I think Dr. Chatra highlighted, the economy has been through a lot, and I think for a lot of the retail businesses, you've probably seen your worst. You've seen import bans, you've seen openings, you've seen certain price pressures coming in. But from an overall macro point of view, what's your assessment of the economy at the moment? Is it in a point of takeoff? I think we always talk about, can it be in a point of takeoff, or are we still in a point of kind of consolidating stability? Is that the phase that we're in?
Thanks, Shiran, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me. I remember it was more than 10 years ago, a group of us gathered. I was involved then in the Keells supermarkets, and decided to start this association. I think that was around 2013, 12, 13. And good to see, I mean, I haven't been involved at all, but good to see how much the association has progressed over the years and become quite a visible and vocal association now in the country. On the economy, I think we need to look at it in the context of the economic crisis that we had in 2022. As you all know, it was the worst crisis, economic and financial crisis the country has seen. Even at the height of the war in the country, we didn't see the economy crumble the way it did in 2022. Our reserves went down to $20 million, and we defaulted for the first time on our foreign debt. And then the situation on the ground, we had 10 to 13 power cuts. People had to queue for days, weeks to get petrol and diesel, and it was like a COVID lockdown all over again. But I think the fact that it became so bad enabled the new team, the governor, the treasury secretary, supported also politically, to make some radical reforms that we should have done many decades ago. I mean, just one example is that we were really living beyond our means, subsidizing everything from petrol to diesel to domestic gas to electricity, fertilizer. So really that could not go on forever. But had it not been for the crisis, the way the subsidies were removed overnight, we would not have been able to do it in the past, because there would have been a revolt. Prices had to, because when you remove the subsidies, prices doubled, tripled, and it was very painful for the people. But because it was available at any price, people were okay. They were not revolting. Also, the IMF came into the picture, and we have been in 17 IMF programs, but in the past we have gone into an IMF program before we collapsed. And then what happens is we just do a bit of a temporary solution, bit of like a sticking plaster, and then in 2 years we are back to another crisis. So there have been cycles. But this time some fundamental changes were made. So if you look at the macro today, look at the low fiscal deficit, low inflation, the current account surplus, 3 years of balance of payment surplus, the revenue collection. When the IMF 5-year IMF program was agreed upon, most of the experts said that we will not hit the 2023 revenue target. Then 2024 there was a big step up. They said impossible 2024. 2025 there was another big step up. All that looked impossible according to the experts, but every year we have hit our revenue target, tax, import duties, and all that. And really, the macro, it's, you know, sometimes when you look at these figures, it's hard to imagine this is the same country. So I think we are really now on a very stable footing. The central bank is independent by legislation. So remember, one of the biggest issues here was the ups and downs in inflation and interest rates. You know, you could never really plan. You know, they were printing money for the last 30, 40 years. It's been the same issue. But now that the central bank is truly independent by law, the politicians can't get them to print money. So the inflation targeting of the central bank for the first time might actually work. And if the inflation targeting works, we might have sustained low interest rates. So all that is fundamentally very different. And it's going to, if it continues like this, and it should for the next few years, I think the business sentiment should keep improving. I can't really say we are going to take off at this point, because I think we need to do a lot more to attract investment. We have achieved the stability, but we need to do more. We need to identify sectors for new investment. A lot of policy work needs to be done. But it's really a relief that we are where we are, because in 2022, I think the private sector was nervous that we'll end up like some of these other countries like Zimbabwe and Venezuela and Argentina and Turkey, that for years and years it's a never-ending cycle of high inflation, crashing exchange rates. So we've done well to achieve the stability we have. I think we have to focus more on investment to really to take off.
Thanks. I think just picking on your low interest rate point that you mentioned, I think if you look at the last 18 months, we've had interest rates, if you look at the prime lending rate under 10%, around 8.5%, 9.5%. We've not seen this level of stability in interest rates for quite a long time. On the other hand, also you have the liquidity in the market quite high. Most companies also flushed with cash, not really deploying for investment. Where do you see businesses, and in particular in this room, kind of looking at the macro and saying, okay, if they buy into your view of stability in the next 3 years, is there now a case for them to now think of long-term investment without just thinking of the next 6 to 12 months or working capital financing, but really think of long-term investment, which maybe then can catalyze your foreign direct investment in?
I think it is a time to start looking at long-term investment. Low interest rates and the liquidity you're talking about, AWPLR. The other thing is I didn't mention is because the subsidies were removed overnight for the state-owned enterprises today, most of them are either making a profit or breaking even. Of course, you have Sri Lankan Airlines and some outliers, but generally they are breaking even. I can't imagine again, think of the last, some of you are too young to know, but last 30 years, everything, they were all losing big amounts of money and then sucking the liquidity from the system by borrowing mainly from the state banks. So today, when the SOEs are not needing to subsidize their losses by borrowing from the system, and the government revenue has hit these unprecedented levels, then the liquidity will continue. Central bank can achieve the inflation targets, therefore interest rates should remain. So you're going to see a gradual improvement overall in the business sentiment. Now, for your decision for retailers, I think there are some segments that will continue to grow. Charita is here, so I can talk about the supermarkets. Grocery retail will grow if the economy continues to grow at 3, 4, 5%, 5%, and the conversion will happen from the mom and pop stores and the pullers to the supermarkets. That and you can say if the economy is stable, that it will continue to grow. But some other areas of retail which might need faster growth rate for the economy, I'm not so sure. I think it will keep getting better, But how much it will get better, I mean, some other Asian countries have big luxury retail businesses. Now, when will Sri Lanka reach the prosperity for luxury retail, for instance, is hard to predict. I think our growth rate will have to increase, and it's probably many, many years away. But overall, I think it's time to start seriously thinking of new investment and expanding your businesses, because if it continues like this, the environment should improve. And anyway, for retailers, all of you, you know, in the last 15 years, compared to where you were, despite all the chaos in this country, compared to where your volumes were 15 years ago, they are much higher now, because our GDP per capita has grown from $1,500 to $3,500. One example I use is John Keells sold Pizza Hut. I don't know whether there is anyone from Pizza Hut here, but we sold Pizza Hut when there were like 10 outlets because it was never making money. That was a big mistake, because I think Pizza Hut today has 200 outlets. Right? And it's not only Pizza Hut as an example, so many other fast food chains. And so retail is in a better place than 20 years ago. And I think given this unprecedented macro indicators we have, in 5 years, retail should be in a much better place. Even if we don't achieve those 7-8% growth rates and we continue to grow at 4%, I think retail will be in a much better place.
Linking to your point on investment, and there's a question from the audience also. When evaluating new investments or expansions, it says 3 metrics, but maybe 1 or 2 metrics that matter to you beyond just the top line revenue figure?
The most important indicator is return on capital employed. So we are very transparent as the John Keells Group that we have hurdles for return on capital employed and return on equity. It doesn't mean we have to hit those targets in the first year of operations. It really depends on the business. Some businesses have a longer gestation period, others are shorter. But we are in 6 verticals, and we feel that in all those 6 verticals, there is a lot of growth potential in Sri Lanka. So we'll continue to invest in those segments. If there is a compelling opportunity in a new area, we might look at it, but otherwise 6 is diverse enough. We'll probably stick to those 6, but in all those, we look for return on capital, return on equity as the main driver in the medium to long term, not immediate returns, before we make an investment decision.
Sure. Sticking into the macro, last question on this topic. So I think if you buy into the stability story, and if you feel these cycles of boom busts are gone, I think the skeptics would say, okay, we've done the foundation, but we're not building the next flows of reform. What do you feel are some of these key reforms or structural changes that need to happen so that we move away from these cycles, we sustain the low interest rates?
Yeah, I mean, the recent reforms, the central bank being made independent, I think is the most critical reform, and great it has happened. I hope that remains like that. Then we remove the subsidies, so the fiscal deficit, the liquidity, all that has improved. And it has become part of the system now. There hasn't been a reaction. The prices have increased so much. But now to generate investment and really get moving, I think a lot of areas we have been talking about, seems like for decades and decades, the national single window, the digital ID, the Aadhaar card equivalent we are trying to implement is now progressing. The people involved are confident that we might be able to issue the first number by the end of this year. So they're talking about September, October. That will be quite a game changer as it has been in India, the Aadhaar card. Customs ordinance, we know all the red tape in customs and other issues. So both on the national single window and the customs ordinance, there are committees, and the Ceylon Chamber is very involved in working towards reforming those. But we've been trying to do this for 20 years, but hopefully we can push through some of these reforms We have the para-tariffs. I know not a popular thing to say that we should ease out the para-tariffs because we have been protecting local manufacturers. But the flip side of that is that it's very expensive for the Sri Lankan consumers because you're protecting the manufacturers, but when you can get imports cheaper, it's much more expensive for the consumers. And also you need to remove the para-tariffs so that the input costs go down for our exporters. So those are some of the structural reforms I think we should be focused. On the tourism side, we need to do a global promotion campaign. That's not a structural reform, but it's something the industry has been asking for since the end of the war, now more than 15 years, and we haven't done a single global promotion campaign like the Malaysian. You all would have seen Malaysia, Truly Asia, Incredible India, the Indonesian campaigns. So you talk, India is a fast-growing market into Sri Lanka, but you talk to someone from India, they say all these other countries are promoting themselves, and you don't hear anything about Sri Lanka. So that's another area to focus on. But so some of those are reforms.
Zooming out of Sri Lanka and looking at the global context of where things are, I think you every year attend Davos, and it's a very interesting conversation or a week long of different insights coming out. This year in particular was exciting with Trump and so many others, the Canadian Prime Minister and Musk and all of them coming in. What were your kind of top 3 key takeaways that would be relevant to a Sri Lankan business?
So Davos, the World Economic Forum, there was a concern that it might be dying off now. It's almost 50 years of the World Economic Forum, that it was losing momentum, and the founder, Klaus Schwab, had stepped aside. But this year actually was probably one of the biggest forums. The thinking was that because Larry Fink, the BlackRock managing partner, is now one of the co-chair, that because of his calls around the world, a lot of people attended. So apart from Donald Trump, there were 80 heads of government. But there were 2 real areas of focus. One was because Trump was there. There was a lot of noise around geopolitics and all those issues, tariffs, and a lot of government level discussions. 80 heads of government were there. But the other area almost entirely, usually there is focus on sustainability, CSR, all that, but here it was entirely either geopolitics side. The other thing was AI. So it was dominated by AI. And, going there from Sri Lanka, you realize how removed we are from what is happening in the AI space. I won't repeat. I'm sure all of you watch these podcasts, and Elon Musk, as you said, was there, and some of the predictions he's making. I'll just mention one thing. I'm sure you all have seen this, but he's saying, and you would normally think that he doesn't exaggerate, that by the end of this year or latest by next year, AI will be more intelligent than all humans collectively. Right? And if you consider that, then the kind of progress you will have in all other areas is going to be unprecedented. The other area was around autonomous driving. So now they've just announced that they will have autonomous taxis in London, in the UK, from September. Again, so you were asking what are the takeaways. You need the legislation, so hard to see how quickly Sri Lanka can get on the bandwagon, because we'll have to introduce the legislation for things like autonomous vehicles. And all the vehicle manufacturers are now moving into the autonomous space. So it'll happen very quickly. And also robotics. So with the advances in AI, you are going to see a rapid progress in robotics, where a lot of, so apart from the soft skills of human beings, like in law, accounting, coding, which will be replaced, or a lot of it taken over by AI. With AI, you will also have a lot of the physical processes being taken over with robotics, surgeries and manufacturing, and the pace at which it is happening, you don't sometimes notice. So I think I would really recommend that all of you get on. Now it's so easy on YouTube and so on to just listen to what some of these leading companies and people are saying about the speed at which things are going to change, because it seems to be real. I mean, I lived it. One example, flying to Switzerland on Qatar Airways, and no matter where you are, normally as you take off for the first half an hour you have Wi-Fi, and for the final half an hour as you're about to land you have Wi-Fi, but otherwise the Wi-Fi is very weak. You can barely send a WhatsApp. Here, because of Starlink, now Qatar is on Starlink, the entire flight you had Wi-Fi as if you were on the ground, better than if you were on the ground. So you can have a Microsoft Teams call, you can have meetings. So, actually a flight was one of the few places you had some peace, but my WhatsApp was ringing. So that is a kind of thing. So very, very rapid changes.
So linked to that, I think there was a question from the audience in terms of how can retail leaders, in particular those in the room here, can build capacity internally to integrate AI, in particular with retail being very much consumer-facing, interacting with the needs and preferences. What kind of capabilities should retail leaders build within their companies? I know it's a bit of a broad question.
Yeah, it's a very broad and so many different types of retail. But if I can talk about one thing that at Keells supermarkets we've been doing, I think Charitha is a better expert on that, is around advanced data to start with and then to move into AI. So with the supermarkets, because we had the Nexus loyalty scheme, and I think it's the biggest loyalty scheme in the country, and it was at the time on a digital platform. So it was easy to extract the data and use the data, and we went into a very big exercise about starting in 2019 group-wide, but we started with the supermarkets in advanced data, using that data in particular from the Nexus system, but also the data we are on SAP Retail, and so we have access to data on availability and so on. That exercise we haven't really moved to AI yet, but we will quickly. It's in the process of now starting to use AI to better use that data, even better use that data. But we have seen very good results with what we have done. People are quite skeptical sometimes, all this noise about data analytics, do you really see results? But okay, maybe because in the grocery retail space a lot of work had been done globally, and we had McKinsey working with us, and for them, they had a lot of experience, but we've seen real results. So the kind of footfall growth that we are seeing now, okay, there have been a lot of initiatives, but I think some of the work we have done around data has played a role in driving good footfall growth in our businesses. And with AI, the one thing though is, while there seems to be a lot of progress, what I heard at the World Economic Forum in Davos talking to corporates is that it's been slow for them to see results in their businesses. So one guy, the McKinsey head, called it the AI paradox, what he calls the AI paradox. He said 80% of companies are now trying AI. Only 10% know how to scale it in their businesses, and only 5% are at the moment seeing any results. Now, what's happening in if you're a major international bank or a multinational consumer company, you have to now try AI because your competition is now integrating AI, so there is no waiting. But in Sri Lanka, maybe we have a little more time because the competition is also not yet rapidly adopting it, and the rest of the world is also learning. So unlike data analytics, advanced data analytics, where for the last 15 years a lot of work had been done, and it was a bit of a plug and play here. With AI, now if you say what can we do with AI in any of your retail businesses, even the best in the world haven't really made that much progress. So we have to be a bit careful about the noise, follow the progress, see what the others are doing, but it's not as if you're going to immediately see results, and no one in the world has really seen very big results right now. So maybe there's a little bit of space and time to study this, see what is happening globally. But one thing is, you've got to be ready to change the culture and the skills. So with the data analytics work we did, we have a lot of data scientists, analysts, people with that mindset, with those sort of STEM mindset. And I think any retail business is going to need that. So that those are, I think, the people skills are going to be critical.
So getting the data right, and I think the STEM, hiring more from the STEM are critical.
Okay, one thing is to start, if you're not already into the data side, is to start cleaning up your data. You probably have years and years of data, customer data. Maybe that's the first step, to get the expertise to start cleaning up the data and organizing it in a way where you can start using it effectively going forward.
Sure. On the second takeaway, I think you mentioned geopolitical risk. Quite a few questions coming in from the audience talked about how Sri Lanka should position itself with what's going on with the different polarized world and different blocks coming in. Where does Sri Lanka kind of position itself going forward?
I think we should continue a non-aligned stance. I don't think we are really big or relevant enough to worry about having to align with one particular side in this multipolar situation that is rapidly evolving. Of course, we've had to manage India and China given our strategic location, but I think we should really have good relations with all these power blocks that are emerging, and because we are relatively small, I don't think it's going to be very controversial for us to manage that.
Sure. So moving back on to the Sri Lanka growth story, and of course focusing on retail as well, we know the macro story is going on. What sectors do you feel would really be the key drivers of growth in the next maybe 5 to 10 years? You mentioned John Keells is in 6 verticals. Are some of those part of the story, or are there maybe outlier sectors that can really be part of the broader economic growth agenda?
No, there are outlier sectors for certain, but if I look at the next 10 or 20 years, the obvious opportunities that we are within 1 hour of the fastest growing big economy in the world. So, India is growing at 7% a year, depending on the year. Sometimes it's 8%. South India, which is so close to Sri Lanka, is the fastest growing part of India, growing at double digits. And if you just look at it, India is where China was 25 years ago. And if you look at the neighboring countries of China and how China lifted their whole neighborhood by the way they grew and by the way they prospered, really Sri Lanka kind of can't go wrong. And you can see this already. Look at the tourism. Last year we had 530,000 Indian tourists. 15 years ago it was, I think, 100,000 or 120,000. And the way outbound tourism from India is going to grow, I think 2024, there were 30 million outbound Indian travelers. In China, there were 155 million outbound travelers. So India's 30 million is going to grow to 100 million plus in the next so many years. And if Sri Lanka is one of the preferred destinations for leisure travel, so that number will grow almost for sure, as long as we can keep Sri Lanka stable. So that is some of the thinking. You mentioned the John Keells business, or City of Dreams and Cinnamon Life, was envisioned 10 years ago or longer back in expectation of this Indian outbound boom, but also at the time Chinese outbound was also growing. It still is, but Chinese arrivals to Sri Lanka since COVID has dropped. But that Indian momentum is certain. Now look at, we talk about, okay, after the war ended, we had 300,000 tourists a year. Last year we have grown to 2.4 million. But look at the other countries. Vietnam gets 20 million. Thailand gets 35 million. Of course, you can't count the numbers. Bali, I think, the little island of Bali gets 8 million. It's not all about numbers. I saw the chairman of TASL is here. We have to get the higher spending tourists as well. But it's going to, the numbers are going to grow significantly, and I think we can target the higher end Indians if we do the marketing properly in India. That's one segment. The other one is the ports and logistics. Again, India is going to need, Sri Lanka is the main port in South Asia. It's the largest port in South Asia. It's a hub port mainly for India. 85% of our volume is transshipment, and most of that transshipment are the containers in and out of India. But again, look at the numbers and where India is going to go. India in 2024, there were about 20 million containers that went in and out of India. In the same year, there were about 300 million containers that went in and out of China. So India may not grow as fast as China, may not become an export powerhouse, but Indian container volumes are going to grow substantially in the next so many years. And as the main port in South Asia, Colombo Port has a massive opportunity. We can add more capacity, all the support services around it. So those two opportunities alone just shows the opportunity we have by being so close to the fastest growing big economy in the world. I mean, there's almost a consensus now worldwide that this is India's century, and certainly the next 25 years is going to be India's 25 years. So if we can't benefit from that, I mean, it's almost certain we will benefit in a big way unless we shoot ourselves in the foot. So those are, I mentioned two areas. One other thing is wind power, which is outside an area that John Keells is involved in. All the research, there's a World Bank report that has come out, but some others have also studied it. Sri Lanka has 30 to 50 gigawatts, or 30,000 to 50,000 megawatts of wind power generating potential. And some of the wind power we have in the northwest of Sri Lanka is very unusually strong. And now with the two governments now discussing this grid connection with India, I think that is another big opportunity for the country if we can structure it properly to generate the investment that is needed.
Just tagging into the India story, is that and you mentioned luxury retail a little early in the conversation. Is retail tourism maybe the next, should we make Sri Lanka a retail tourism hub? Is that a way forward if you tie into the Indian market?
I think there are a lot of retail tourism hubs. Without becoming a hub, I think we should first make retail attractive for tourists. The issue here is because of our import duties, retail, in particular luxury retail, is expensive. Costs in Sri Lanka are high. I was talking to one of the IT services companies that operate in a big way in Colombo. I was asking them whether they were going to expand in Sri Lanka, and they said the issue was that their model is to have about 1/3 of their people from India, experienced people who can train the Sri Lankan people to join their business. And they said the people from India don't like to come to Colombo because the cost of living is so high in Colombo compared to India. So costs are high here, groceries, the vegetables, fruits. So those are, but tourists are not looking to buy that. But in the luxury segment, so I'll give you, we have started City of Dreams, and we have the casino at City of Dreams, and it is a typical for when you have very large world-class casinos with foreign travelers. you have luxury retail around the casino. So the idea was with the mall to have luxury retail there. The watchers, if someone wins, they like to go off and buy a Rolex or some other watch or buy something for their spouse or family. But here, when you look at the price of some of this compared to what they can buy, the price at which they can buy it in Dubai or Hong Kong, or I'm not sure about India, maybe even India, we are not competitive. So first thing is, before we even talk about becoming a shopping hub, is to bring our prices to a point where even for the tourists who are here, where it can be competitive. So I think it's certainly something we must focus on, and government policy should be driven towards making retail attractive for tourists.
And I think that ties into your earlier point on tariff reform to make it competitive to import it here, or for value add. Let's open it up to the audience. Enough of my questions and some of the questions coming in online. If there's any question you want to probe Krishan, on some of the areas we talked about, but something even different to the conversation. Monday mornings are generally very quiet. Yes, go ahead, yes. I think a mic should come to you, hopefully. Or just...
Yeah. You credited much of the achievements to what was stoic leadership, right? Making very hard decisions,
Yeah.
and the ability to do that. But we now have more populist government, so post-IMF.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think more than even the leadership in 2022, because it got so bad, it made it easier for the policymakers to make radical reforms, because people had experienced the consequences of economic collapse, so they were willing to accept the pain of prices doubling and tripling, say, when the subsidies were removed. And earlier we have been in IMF programs and not done enough, but here we have followed the program to the letter because we learnt our lesson. So populism, I think there was an Indian economist in Sri Lanka like 2 weeks back, and he had said the biggest priority for the country should be to make sure we don't forget, right? So how long will we remember that crisis so that we won't do populist things? So, hopefully we will remember it for the next 5 years or 10 years. But beyond that, if we are going back to subsidies and handouts and all that, then we are back to that same cycle. But for now, I think we have learnt our lesson because we are sticking to the discipline. And if you stick to the discipline each year, things will get better for business. There will be more certainty, interest rates will remain at the same levels, inflation, and more liquidity. And that's going to be quite a game changer. I don't think we realize. One example is mortgages. In Sri Lanka, in the banking system, mortgages are less than 10% of assets, about 7%. In any other country, it will be over 25%. And the reason mortgages are so low in Sri Lanka is because banks have not been able to give long-term mortgages at fixed rates because it has been so unpredictable. But now if the inflation targeting works and interest rates remain low, with each year you will see banks now slowly taking a risk, and mortgages will pick up as it should, as it has all over the world. So,
hopefully we don't have to go through another crisis to keep remembering it. Let's hope on that. We have time for more questions. Any? Yes. The mic will come to you. Just, yeah.
Krishan, on removing tariffs and basically the duties, how do we get the balance of safeguarding our manufacturing sector? Because I have exposure to that industries as well. There's no way that Sri Lanka can compete with imports from China, India, and those countries. How do we sort of reach a balance in that area?
I think we need to redirect our resources to areas where Sri Lanka has a comparative advantage. Now, if you're saying that imports from India and China and elsewhere are going to be much cheaper, then is that a business that we should be in manufacturing in this country, because why should everyone here pay much more? Because our manufacturing costs are higher. Our construction cost is more than double the construction cost in India. Right? That is, building a hotel here is, people from India are shocked at how much it costs. Or why should we pay for apartments much more than, because the construction cost is high, because we are protecting our local manufacturers. So when you, on the balance of it, yes, by protecting the manufacturers, you will help retain a few thousand jobs, but then you're talking about a country of consumers. So we must, as a country, find areas where we are competitive and focus on that. Overnight you can't do it, because that's not right. That's why there is a phasing out of tariffs. So manufacturers must also learn to be competitive, and if it's not competitive in the country, we should manufacture something where we are competitive. Because otherwise the whole population is losing out, because we are protecting a few manufacturers.
If I just take a stab at your question, just putting on my economy side, I think if you look at Australia also, it was in a similar position probably in the 80s and the 90s, being very protectionist, and then they opened up. Of course, they did it in stages, as Krishan mentioned, but also they took a call on winners and losers and how to support the losers with opening up. And that's what you call a trade adjustment program, where you support or you rescale some of these companies into other sectors. So I think that's what we probably need to look at it. I think the government right now, what they're looking at is, if you look at the 7,000 plus HS codes, they'll initially maybe look at 2,000 HS codes in the first phase, remove the cessors, but add that into the customs duty rates. So I think the first stage for Sri Lanka is to remove the para-tariffs, because that's something not common in other countries. You don't have para-tariffs, you just have your duty rate. In Sri Lanka, you have duty rate plus all these other post-border taxes. So they'll remove those and then add it into the duty rate. And I think the next stage is to bring it down over time. So probably it's a 2-3 stage approach, which will provide some time for businesses to adjust in as well. They're yet to spell it out formally, but there was a consultation last week, so just to update you on that.
How do we replace the state revenue that is lost?
Yeah, no, that's why it's a 2 stage. So, for example, if you're removing your cess or something like that, you would increase your customs duty to compensate. So it's a revenue neutral point of view, but you're basically harmonizing your duty structure without having several tax rates. The next stage, when we grow and we are collecting much higher taxes, then you can bring the duty component down, because 40-50% of our revenue collection is trade taxes, so it's tough to do it in one shot. And in particular with this IMF program, you can't remove it, because then you have to find other revenue sources which may not come as quickly. Yeah. We have time, I think, for a few more questions. Was there someone at the back I can see, or no? Okay. So just sticking on to retail, Krishan, if you looking at the macro, looking at some of the risks happening, looking at some of the technology trends, where do you see the future of Sri Lankan retail heading in the next 5-10 years?
I think it will sort of head in the same direction as retail elsewhere. Hard to say whether it's going to be in 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, but the people who will do better are those who will use technology to better understand their customer. I think, and that goes back to using all the customer data that you have, finding a way to process that data in the best way possible, and then targeting those customers, ideally in a custom-made way, where you you target your individual customers, because now the technology, now with data analytics and with AI and emerging so rapidly, those who adopt that the fastest and can deliver the best for their customer are going to be the retailers who will prevail. So just as an example, so many different types of retailers here, but look at the customer experience in an Apple store. It's so different to your typical retail experience. You would have one person, if you walk in, there's usually one sales assistant who will be with you through your journey. There are digital screens where, if you're looking to buy an iPhone, you can use that digital screen to learn more about what you're buying while you're in the store. And there are demonstrations also in the store. So the experience in that store is so different to your traditional retail experience. Now, you can't replicate that because it's so many different types of retail here, but the more you can do that, now that is the in-store experience, but that together with targeting customers with their personalized data will make the big difference. And then you can also use technology to reduce wastage, making sure you use all the right algorithms for availability. You can use technology to optimize the use of space, to reduce pilferage, to improve your supply chain. So I think the next 10 years, 5 to 10 years is going to be driven by the opportunities that technology is going to offer.
There's a question, I think, on the EV space, and I know Charita is also here, but I think just to put it in context, I think of probably the group saw an opportunity you're not really in the motor trade business, but you saw an opportunity and you really disrupted the sector and made EVs now part of the more mainstream usage of vehicles. For those, I think, looking at these kind of opportunities, what did you really see in that? And I think there's a related question in that in terms of where do you see EV market kind of heading going forward?
So we have not been in vehicles before, as you know. We could see that EVs was likely to be the future, EV and hybrid. And actually, until we got into it, even I didn't realize how much it is likely to be the future, because as we started studying the space, you realize how much cheaper it is to own a electric vehicle or a hybrid vehicle, really, because today in Sri Lanka, for a household, typically your petrol or diesel cost is one of your biggest expenses. You can bring that expense down by 80% if you're operating a EV. If you have solar at home, you then now have no expense, right? And then even the maintenance cost is so much less than a internal combustion engine vehicle. And with the technology progressing, EV technology progressing as fast as it is now in China, 60% of new vehicle purchases are electric vehicles. And that is changing rapidly. It will be 80%. And naturally, it's like switching from the landline to a mobile phone. And it's like switching from an old mobile phone to a smartphone. The switch is going to happen, and there's a very high level of confidence now worldwide that it will happen. And in smaller countries like Sri Lanka, where the charging infrastructure is not so important because you can go 400 to 500 kilometers at least with one charge. That's why in Dubai, in Singapore, electric vehicles are very popular. So first thing was we felt EV has a good future. Second was we knew BYD was the number one EV brand in the world and very cost competitive. And the third thing was because of our whole commitment to sustainability and the environment, we felt it was a business that would really strengthen our credentials in that space. So that's why we diversified into kind of a new area.
And where do you see the EV market heading?
So as I said, I can see in Sri Lanka or in Sri Lanka as well, it will follow the global trend. I'm not saying it will be only BYD, but the future will be EV and hybrid. I mean, hybrid gives you the comfort that you don't have to worry about charging, but hybrid also gives you all the cost savings, because for your day-to-day running, you can run 100 kilometers on EV. So you charge your car at home and you get all the cost benefits of an EV. It's only if you go out of Colombo and out of the Western Province that you might have to use your petrol or diesel. So as people see the benefits, they'll tell their friends and their relations, look, my petrol bill has come down, my maintenance cost has come down so much, that more and more people are going to start using this. And the technology will also keep improving. Now BYD is going to soon roll out a 5-minute charger. So it's going to be like the switch from the land phone to the mobile phone.
And in closing, I think there's a question on talent and workforce and Gen Zs, and that's possibly a question you all discuss in the group as well, in terms of how leadership should really rethink of engagement, motivation, and performance management with this new generation coming into the workforce. How do you all approach it?
Well, one thing, I think a lot of the traditional roles will continue. It will take some time for AI to replace a lot of roles. So if you're running a retail store, you will still need the traditional roles. Maybe you'll need fewer accountants and people who are doing desk jobs. Maybe you might be able to reduce those numbers with AI. Let's see how it evolves. But where you have to be prepared is, for instance, in our supermarkets business 5 years ago, we didn't have data scientists and we had STEM graduates, but they were doing traditional roles. So the importance of having those skills are going to grow if you're going to make the best use of it. And the other thing is, I think we've got to become more globally competitive on our remuneration and incentives. Today we've had a big brain drain in Sri Lanka, in particular after the crisis. So that's going to be a challenge, and especially for people with those STEM-like skills, it's not difficult to get employment outside the country. So whether it's retailers or people in businesses in other sectors, we'll have to become more competitive and have more performance-oriented cultures and performance-oriented incentives, so that we drive productivity and retain our best talent. And then over time, again, if you listen to Elon Musk, robotics is going to also progress. Not only Musk, but all these other technology experts. Robotics, with the progress in AI, robotics will progress very fast. So then you're going to see other traditional roles, not just the soft skill areas, other roles also getting replaced. So maybe on the shop floor, you're going to need fewer people. If you can have digital screens to explain and so on, you might need fewer people on the shop floor. You may need fewer people in your back of house for sorting and other areas. So robotics could happen, but I think that's a few years away. So those are some of the changes.
Sure. Thanks, Krishan. I think this felt like a podcast with a live audience. But I think thank you for entertaining all these questions on the macro. We went into Davos, we covered Trump, Elon Musk. We went to India and its growth story, and then of course onto retail and some of the key questions that came in. Thank you to the audience. I think the QR code worked. We got more questions coming in, and we were able to roll it into the dialogue as well. So thank you, Krishan. A big round of applause for him and taking all these questions. Back to Dr. Chapra and the team.